Israel's Prime Minister has warned Iran that nowhere in the Middle East is beyond its reach.
There is nowhere in the Middle East Israel cannot reach. There's nowhere we will not go to protect our people and protect our country.
Just today, its airstrikes killed Hamas's leader in Lebanon, 3 commanders from another Palestinian group, and at least 45 people in one attack south of Beirut. And as Israeli tanks prepare to cross the border, the number of people fleeing into Syria for safety has passed 100,000. Let's first get the latest from Alex.
Yes, a new phase in this war absolutely underway. Israeli defense officials have said it openly. The invasion has begun, by which I mean technically small groups of special forces crossing the border, probing reconnaissance missions. And the reason they would do that is to presage a larger invasion. Now, the Israeli Security Cabinet in session, emergency session now with the Prime Minister. The Americans briefing the incursion. Invasion will happen in the next few hours. If it does, the Israelis very much saying this will be a limited operation, cutting off the Shia villages along the border from which they say Hezbollah has been increasingly firing rockets into Israel. But make no mistake, invasion, incursion, whatever your language, this will be, if it happens, the 4th time that Israel has invaded southern Lebanon in the last half century.
Well, with me here, Secunda.
Well, Chris, here in Lebanon, a mood of deep and widespread public anxiety as everyone waits to see what Israel does next. And really, it does seem as if the ball is firmly in Israel's court. They're the ones setting the agenda right now. For all the fighting talk that we've heard from Hezbollah, Israel has really been dealing Hezbollah some devastating blows, as well as killing many civilians. It seems more than 1,000 people killed since this latest upsurge of violence. In terms of what might happen next, Hezbollah may decide that they somewhat favour an Israeli ground incursion because it gives them the opportunity to launch guerrilla attacks on Israeli soldiers. So far, their responses to Israel's airstrikes have not been particularly effective given Israel's powerful air defense systems. We've been reporting today on the impact of those Israeli airstrikes in Lebanon, where many people have been killed, a warning that some of the images in our report are distressing.
They've been searching here for survivors and dead bodies for more than 24 hours. A huge pile of rubble and twisted metal now lies where a 6-story apartment block once stood, until it was struck by Israeli missiles yesterday afternoon. Mustafa is part of a local civil defense team who rushed to the scene in the village of Ain al-Delb to the south of Beirut.
We arrived and we saw a massacre. There were people living here who had already been displaced from the south and were staying with relatives.
Were any of the people here fighters?
There might have been 2 or 3 guys who were Hezbollah members, but there were not any senior commanders here.
Amongst the reported victims, 9 members of the Faris family. At least 45 people are known to have been killed here. Dozens of others are said to still be missing.
It looks like they may have just discovered yet another body beneath the rubble. They've asked us not to get too close out of respect. This appears to have been one of the deadliest Israeli strikes on Lebanon so far, but Israel's assault shows no sign of stopping.
Hezbollah is being pummeled with Israeli airstrikes across Lebanon. The missiles Hezbollah have been firing, by contrast, often intercepted and doing little tangible damage. With an Israeli ground offensive looking increasingly imminent, Hezbollah's deputy leader gave the group's first televised speech since the killing of leader Hassan Nasrallah last week.
We will face any possible attack, and we are ready. If the Israelis decide to enter by land, the resistance forces are ready for a ground engagement. We are confident that the Israeli enemy will not achieve its goals, and we will emerge victorious from this battle.
But Israeli intelligence has managed to penetrate deep into its enemy's operational secrets. Last night, for the first time, they struck central Beirut, killing 3 members of a Palestinian armed group and terrifying local residents. Imad lives in the building that was targeted.
I was just outside and rushed to see this catastrophe. There's still an unexploded bomb inside. This is the work of our enemy who knows no limits.
There's a pervasive sense of fear. Around 1 million Lebanese people are said to have been displaced already. Amira and her family are sheltering outside this mosque.
The situation here is very difficult. There is no food, no milk, no nappies, nowhere to sleep. There is 6 of us and barely a blanket and a pillow between us.
Lebanon has been here before. A bloody Israeli invasion 2 decades ago ended in stalemate. Now a new generation faces a deeply uncertain future.
Well, joining me now is General Khalil Helou, formerly of the Lebanese army and now a parliamentarian candidate and a member of civil society. I mean, if this invasion is happening now, and it might be happening in the next hour or 2, who is going to defend Lebanon? The Lebanese army or Hezbollah?
The Lebanese army follows the instructions of the Lebanese government. The Lebanese government is asking for the implementation of the 1701 United Nations Council resolution. And this means that the Lebanese army's mission in South Lebanon is not a combat mission.
So it won't do anything to defend the country?
The duty of the Lebanese army is to defend Lebanon if there is an invasion. And the details are left, the tactical details are left to the commanders on the theater of operations. And everyone knows that the balance of power is not at all in the favor of the Lebanese army. And this war was started by Hezbollah without consulting neither the Lebanese army, neither the Lebanese government. So the Lebanese army now is going to have the burden to defend Lebanon. But to defend Lebanon is not only by military means, it's also by the United Nations Security Council resolutions also.
What about Hezbollah then? I mean, you know, how large is their fighting force near the border? Where are they?
There is no assessment, not any precise assessment about what remains of Hezbollah forces on the ground in South Lebanon. The major forces are in the tunnels, and we assume that they will use these tunnel shafts in order to attack the Israeli forces that are advancing or that will advance in South Lebanon. But we should wait for the next couple of hours or couple of days to see if the potential is still the same as it was before.
If the position of the Lebanese government and therefore the Lebanese army is that it wants the implementation of the UN resolution that says Hezbollah withdraws from the border and the Lebanese army polices that area, has Hezbollah made a strategic error today by going on television and saying it will fight?
Of course, because Israel was exerting a huge pressure on Lebanon and on Hezbollah, and the international community was asking for the implementation of this resolution. So the positioning of Hezbollah tonight gave Israel an argument in order to carry out this invasion, and this will complicate the situation totally. And the role of the Lebanese army at that moment is to keep as much as possible neutral in order to replace Hezbollah, because there is no solution otherwise than implementing the 1701.
I mean, 1,000 people are already dead in the last few days.
Yes.
This invasion will have massive consequences for the Lebanese people. I mean, what is the proportion of support in this country for the course Hezbollah is putting you on?
This is a huge cost, and I don't think that Lebanon should have paid this price for nothing, because the balance of power was clear. But I think that the assessment and the judgment of the situation was wrong from Hezbollah.
But are you a lone voice, or do many people think like you?
Well, the implementation of the 1701, this is the only solution that still remains implementable now.
General, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Well, Israel's military has declared areas of northern Israel a closed military zone as it steps up preparations for a ground invasion of Lebanon. But it leaves Israel fighting ground wars on two fronts. And as Israeli forces prepared to move into Lebanon, Hamas fighters ambushed Israeli vehicles in southern Gaza, killing several soldiers. Our chief correspondent Alex Thompson reports from Jerusalem.
We've seen all this before, of course. Just under a year ago, heavy armour massed for the invasion of Gaza. But this is today, northern Israel. The IDF, Israeli Defense Force, saying its special forces already conducting probing operations on the ground in southern Lebanon. Hezbollah says it's ready for what would be Israel's fourth invasion in 50 years.
For the return of the residents of the north to their homes, we will be ready to make every effort. This is your mission. This is the mission of the IDF, and this is what we will do, and we will employ all that is needed. Your forces, other forces, from the air, from the sea, and also from the land.
Central Jerusalem, and you could so easily be forgiven for believing this country is at peace. Until this dramatic appeal, he said straight to the people of Iran.
There is nowhere in the Middle East Israel cannot reach. There's nowhere we will not go to protect our people and protect our country. With every passing moment, the regime is bringing you, the noble Persian people, closer to the abyss.
So why, and why now? Perhaps because Iran promises revenge after Israel killed the leader of Hezbollah, Iran's delivery team for war on Israel 3 days ago. As with Gaza, the same question, though, now hangs over Lebanon. What is the strategy?
I think that in the last 2 months, the Israeli IDF, the Israeli army, managed to more or less conclude most of the military goals in Gaza, and it was more, I would say, ready to take care about the northern front.
Israel, of course, can convert concrete to dust and rubble, degrade a militia, decapitate its command, but what then? When movements, ideologies and dreams remain intact and only politics can work, what then?
We should seek a political solution. What we call a kind of the end game scenario.
And that's a two-state solution, ultimately, isn't it?
I think the two-state solution is in the air, is somewhere. I think that everybody understands that the world and the region is not ready for a two-state solution by now.
Close to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's official residence in Jerusalem this morning. The placards demand peace, a deal to release their loved ones, the hostages, still enduring unimaginable situations in the tunnels of Gaza. But peace, of course, is not on the Netanyahu agenda in Gaza any more than Lebanon. Gaza, near Khan Yunis today, Hamas attacked a number of Israeli military vehicles, seriously injuring several Israeli soldiers. Hamas remains in action almost a year on. Nazerat, Gaza today, 6 more people killed in an Israeli airstrike. Like a scene from an earthquake, those trapped but alive, pinpointed, reassured, and perhaps pulled from the rubble in time. Hezbollah says the Gaza war is why it stepped up its rocket attacks into Israel. Thus, Gaza's violence now brings Lebanon to the brink of a fourth Israeli invasion. And war on a third front continues in Yemen, where at least 4 people were killed by an Israeli air assault on what it said were Houthi rebel positions yesterday. As Lebanon awaits possible Israeli invasion, Israel expects Iran's response any day now, after it killed the Hezbollah leader in Beirut on Friday. It remains all about attack and response, the sound of meaningful diplomacy all but drowned out by the din of war.
Well, as you heard, Israel is directly threatening Iran and its so-called axis of resistance. They clearly believe it's a battle they're winning. The group has long been coordinated and funded by Iran, linking together proxies and militias spanning the Middle East with common goals, resisting Western influence and confronting Israel. One of its members, Hamas in Gaza, has borne the brunt of Israeli strikes since its October 7th attacks on Israel, greatly weakening its firepower. Since then, the Houthis in Yemen and militias in Iraq and Syria have launched retaliatory attacks on Israeli and American military bases, but have been largely repelled. And now Hezbollah, seen as the Axis's most senior member, has also faced major losses at the hands of Israel. So where does this all leave the axis of resistance? With me now is the Iranian academic Mohammad Marandi, who is normally based in Tehran, but you were here in Beirut when this broke out, and you are still here. You know, Iran says that the attack on Nasrallah will be avenged. Where is the revenge?
Well, I came the day after the genocidal onslaught on Lebanon to bring aid and also to give support in any way that I can. There will be revenge, have no doubt. The Israelis will be punished. But I think that you're mistaken. These are not proxies. Ansarullah in Yemen, they defeated the genocidal onslaught that the Americans helped the Saudis with. And proxy doesn't win such wars. They don't win in the Red Sea against the Americans trying to block Israeli trade and stop the genocide and implementing the Genocide Convention. Proxies like Hamas cannot be a proxy when it and Islamic Jihad have prevented the Israeli regime from taking Gaza for almost a year, this small piece of land.
But if Israel is crossing into Lebanon tonight, is Iran going to do anything about it?
Iran will do. I'm not in the government and I'm not in the military, but I have no doubt that Iran will do what it takes to help Hezbollah by any means necessary, and the Israeli regime will be defeated. And I think people should be careful about not falling into the trap of this media campaign that's now growing in the West, that Hezbollah is falling apart. Hezbollah's weakest link has always been Beirut, because Beirut has, since before I was born, it was a center of espionage.
Yeah. And it worked. But you heard our previous guest, the general from the Lebanese army, retired, saying this was a big mistake by Hezbollah and the people are going to pay the price.
Well, there are many generals, former generals in the Lebanese army that say otherwise. The United States will never allow the Lebanese army to even have air defense. They will not allow them to be able to defend the country, because the United States does not want anyone to be able to defend themselves against this Israeli regime. The Americans are helping, and the Europeans, your government, is helping in this genocide in Gaza. And Hezbollah played their heroic role of trying to draw away the Israeli army from Gaza, just like Ansarullah in Yemen. These are the heroes. And the Western governments, they are the terrorists, because they are helping this genocide. All of these, I was 1,000 meters away from those bunker busters. 83, they say they were. Hundreds of people were slaughtered. I know a husband and wife that I think died. I think they lived in those buildings.
I mean, there have been no reliable numbers coming out of that, have there? I mean, it's been very confusing.
There are 6 towers, and those I was here for my sabbatical for a year. Those 6 towers were full of families, but the West talks about people like Justin Trudeau.
Ordinary people will pay the price in this war, as they already have.
They're paying the price because the West is supporting genocide. They're giving the Israeli regime bunker busters to slaughter in Gaza, to slaughter in Lebanon. But Hezbollah's military is intact, and we will see in the coming days that the Israeli regime will fail. They have struck in Beirut, but there are thousands of kilometers of tunnels underground with advanced weapons and highly motivated people who will defend their country.
Why is Hezbollah opposed to the UN resolution that had kept the peace for a while? Why is Iran opposed to just that as the solution? That you pull back, you stop attacking, that's it?
The Hezbollah supports the sovereignty of Lebanon. The United States and the Europeans will not allow Lebanon to be strong. They want a weak Lebanon, just like Jordan, just like Egypt.
But if the Lebanese government wants the UN resolution to be the solution, why is Hezbollah opposed?
The majority of the Lebanese parliament is the Hezbollah coalition. They won the election. But in the Western world, in their worldview, they don't count. Anything that serves the Western narrative is what is acceptable. The majority of people in Iran, in Lebanon, they voted for this coalition, which includes Hezbollah. The majority. And Hezbollah supported the Palestinian people in Gaza while the West was helping with the genocide. So the moral ground is very clear. It's clear who is immoral. It's the West and the Israeli regime, and these people are the heroes who are trying to stop the regime from carrying out genocide in Gaza, and now the regime is carrying out genocide in Lebanon.
Mohammed Marandi, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Well, we can now speak to Orna Mizrahi, who spent 26 years in the Israel Defense Forces and was a Deputy National Security Advisor for Foreign Policy. She is now a senior researcher at the Institute for National Security Studies at Tel Aviv University. Thank you for joining us. If Israeli forces are crossing into southern Lebanon tonight, what is the strategic goal? When do they stop?
Okay, the distinguished guest that you have just asked the question was so cynical by saying that Israel is the one that slaughters and wants this war, but he forgot one thing to mention, that the one that started this war was Hezbollah on the 8th of October. Israel did not do anything to attack Hezbollah till the 8th of October as retaliation for their own attacks. So it's all upside down. His argumentation is totally wrong. Anyway, if you're asking about this ground maneuver that maybe will start tonight, its goal is very clear, and the government was stating its goal. The goal is to bring back the 60,000, 70,000 Israelis, evacuated people from their homes, from the northern border, because of these attacks of Hezbollah that
But
is
when will
carrying
you be able
them
to do that? You know, that is a rhetorical goal, isn't it? The question is, when will you actually be able to
it's
move
not a
people back? At
rhetorical
what
goal.
point
It's
would you
people
stop the
that
war?
cannot. It's not rhetorical at all, because it's the lives of these people. These people cannot go back to their home to live the normal life that they had before because of this attack. The northern part of Israel is under attack for 1 year. So the Israeli army has to do something. We are fed up with that. We are fed up with all these lies, and we decided that we have to do something to protect ourselves and protect our people. And this is why the Israeli army is going, I don't know if it's going to happen tonight, and maybe it will take a while, but the intention is not to invade or anything like that. It's just to clear, to remove all the military presence that is very near to the border, and to give the feeling of security, and that the people of the northern part of Israel will feel secure to go back to their homes. That's all.
Right, so when you say it's just about clearing that area close to the border, are you saying that it'll just be a few miles, and then the Israeli army stops, and then what?
Well,
how do you then, bring about a peace that allows people to go home?
I wouldn't tell you exactly what are the plans of the IDF, because I don't know what is now prepared. There are several scenarios for what they can do, and according to what I understand, there is no reason or intention to go deep inside into Lebanon. And what we want is just to clear the area very adjacent to the border from the presence of Hezbollah and its missiles launchers that are amongst the civilian population. And this is why very little civilians are being injured, because the collateral damage. Israel has no intention to do anything to the Lebanese people, just running after the Hezbollah militants that attack Israel for 1 year, daily attacks. Just yesterday, 100 missiles to the northern part of Israel. And today there were 2 UAVs, dozens of missiles that were launched from Lebanon to Israel. So we cannot suffer it anymore. I don't know if any state in the world could suffer these attacks. And this is the reason that the IDF as maybe the only solution is to go in and do what is needed to do there.
Orna Mizrahi, thank you very much indeed for joining us tonight. Well, the prospect of Israeli troops moving forward into Lebanon is being widely looked at from Washington with some concern. Let's get more from our correspondent there, Siobhan Kennedy. Siobhan.
Well, Christian, this is a very difficult moment for Joe Biden that's potentially showing his diplomatic powers to be weak, certainly his influence over Prime Minister Netanyahu to be pretty ineffective. And why? Well, because we know that Joe Biden rallied nations last week to call for an urgent ceasefire, and yet that did not happen. Instead, what we got was the blast that killed Nasrallah and now reportedly a ground incursion into Lebanon. The president was asked about Israel's imminent actions earlier. Let's hear what his answer was.
Israel may be now launching a limited operation into Lebanon. Are you aware of that? Are you comfortable with their plan?
I'm more aware than you might know, and I'm comfortable with them stopping. We should have a ceasefire now. Thank you.
He's obviously in a very difficult position. On the one hand, the administration welcomes the death of Nasrallah as being good for the region and for the world. But on the other, Biden does not want this conflict to spiral. As ever, he says this into a wider regional war that drags America in along with it. The State Department was a little bit more forthcoming earlier on what it knows about Israel's imminent actions. Let's hear what the spokesperson Matthew Miller had to say.
I'll let Israel speak to its own military operations. We have been engaged in conversations with them about those operations, but the timing, purpose, tempo of those, I'll let them speak to.
As ever, what the US does rather than what it says is perhaps more telling. On that front, the Pentagon has said that it is sending an additional few thousand troops to the Middle East, as well as dozens of fresh squadrons of fighter jets to be ready, yes, to protect US forces in the region, but also to stand ready to defend Israel against any imminent attacks, as it did in the past.
Siobhan Kennedy, and two small pieces of news that do support the idea that invasion is imminent. The Lebanese army has, according to Reuters, withdrawn from several positions along the southern border. And on the other side of that border, Israel has now declared 3 northern communities on its side as a closed military zone.